G'day, Cassie. How are you going? Thank you for joining me today. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions regarding teaching and my upcoming professional experience. So could you just provide me with a little bit of background about your teaching career and sort of what you teach, how long you've been teaching, just some things like that?
Yeah, of course, no worries. So I started teaching about 5 years ago. I was trained in history and visual art. In that time, I started with English and humanities during the school. And I've eventually made my way into the arts, and I'm teaching only visual art to a range of grades. So I have year 7s, year 9 excellence, 2 year 11s and a year 12 class, all visual art.
Awesome. So obviously COVID's something that's been quite extravagant over the last couple of years and has changed a lot of things in life. What changes have you seen within the teaching landscape over the last sort of 12 to 24 months?
It's the online environment for teaching that has changed mostly. We're more proficient in teaching online and delivering lessons in a remote format.
Yeah.
And since being back in the classroom, the majority of teachers have incorporated online learning platforms into the majority of their lessons, as well as an area of sharing resources between teachers. So the majority of lessons are based either in OneNote or Microsoft Teams, and that's where all our lessons are stored, as well as I guess your traditional PowerPoint, Word docs, they're all being used, but mostly OneNotes and Microsoft Teams is used quite frequently. Like it wasn't like that before COVID. Okay,
yeah. Okay, so heading into my final professional experience, going to be working towards completing my GTPA. So just got a few questions regarding sort of some of the key components of that. Firstly, we'll look at data. So as you were saying, the online environment in which learning is taking place now, does that make it a bit easier to sort of collect data? And also, what other sources of data do you use to sort of to get your planning all aligned?
The online platforms are good, I guess, for more practical, theoretical based subjects. I guess I gather data through more of a physical collection of learning stuff they do in the classroom. So I suppose in my subject area, I need to have a sample of their writing capabilities and their ability to draw or make art. But before I do any of that, I use One School, and I use the class dashboard on One School to get an idea of where they're sitting. So I'm able to see what level they're at, like for English, literacy, numeracy, everything like that. I can see behaviour concerns, I can see welfare concerns, I can see whether they're an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander student or not, and this all informs my planning. So I usually collect that data before I teach any class, say at the start of the year, at the start of the term.
Okay.
And then from that, it's more just collecting data during the term, throughout the term, stuff that I do with the kids.
Okay, awesome. So moving on to sort of the teaching and learning side of things. So obviously when you plan lessons within a cycle, there's a lot of things that we need to focus on as teachers, sort of engaging teaching strategies, differentiation of learning, general capabilities and cross-curriculum priorities. So how effective is the use of backward mapping through the planning process, whether it be lesson to lesson, week by week, unit to unit?
backward mapping is used throughout the whole process, and it's a really important tool. It's a really effective tool. It's one of my most favored strategies when planning units. So I always start with both assessments, the making and the responding. So the making of an artwork and responding to a certain question or inquiry question or research task. So I begin my units with starting at the end, and looking at how much time I have and what the kids need to learn based on content descriptors, based on the content descriptors that they have to learn over, let's say, from year 7 to year 8 or year 9 to year 10. I have to look at the entire, so each assessment over those 2-year periods, I have to look at what they have done and what they will do before embedding any of the content descriptors into my planning, because I don't want to do all of them when I don't need to. So I start with the assessment and work my way back, and then I'm able to have a rough guide, and then I can take the weekly learning goals and then turn them into individual lessons, and I end up at the beginning of the term, and I have been able to plan for the content descriptors they need to hit. I've been able to plan for what learning activities actually need to take place for them to be able to achieve success with their assessment.
Awesome. So as you're going through, say through a teaching cycle, how do you collect ongoing student data and make suitable adjustments based on that?
It's basically a bunch of very small learning tasks throughout each lesson. For example, in art, I will collect a practice task at the start of the term. We will do a practice task based on their actual assessment task. So for example, if they were painting an impressionist style painting for their assessment, I would collect something very similar at the beginning of the term to inform my future teaching. So that's where I begin. And then throughout the term, I will collect mostly written tasks, I suppose, to inform my future teaching as well, to see what they need and how much they know about writing about art. So it's basically a collection of physical data, their lesson or their learning activities, and then I just go from there.
Okay, awesome. So moving on to sort of assessing, providing feedback and professional judgment. What do you find some of the most effective strategies for providing feedback to students?
In art, it's basically a lot of verbal feedback. I'm walking around the room, helping the students with whatever task that they're trying to complete. So it's a lot of verbal feedback. I guess it's a very practical subject. So they rely on that instant verbal feedback as they go, as opposed to feedback with their summative assessment. So informal verbal feedback is probably my go-to in visual art. Also demonstration of skills that they need to understand. So I'll be demonstrating throughout the term how to do a specific skill if I feel that they need that demonstration. Self-assessment and peer assessment is also another really effective strategy to utilize throughout the term if you can, especially when you're doing more theoretical stuff, written tasks. That's really helpful for the students when they need that feedback, I guess, moving forward for their written task at the end of the term.
Awesome. So speaking of sort of the end of the term, that summative assessment stage, how do you ensure that you're making quality judgments against criteria for certain assessments? And is there a moderation process? And if so, what does that entail?
Yeah, absolutely. So after every assessment has been completed and each individual teacher marks their class, we all come together in our subject groups or in our year groups, I guess, and we will cross mark each other's work. So moderation in visual art looks very different to what it would be, say, for English or humanities or a core subject. Sometimes there's only one person teaching Year 9 art, for example, so we'll have to join in with another visual art teacher who has taught that subject before to ensure that we're making quality, correct judgments.
Yeah.
So we bring our samples A, B, C, D, E. Hopefully no E's, hopefully no D's, but there is obviously going to be some. We bring them together and we have a look at what we've originally given, the grade that we've originally given, and we discuss whether it needs to go up or down or stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens with every assessment in every class, every subject.
Okay. Awesome. So moving on, so reflecting on your teaching. So once you have been through a teaching cycle, how do you assess the impact that you've had on the teaching through the teaching cycle? Sorry. So do you collect data and then that informs you of your impact, or are there any other ways to do that?
So I guess, well, reflection is a really important part of teaching. You should be doing it always, every day, at the end of every day, at the end of every lesson, throughout each lesson. So I'm reflecting as I go, but I mean, as more of a summative reflection of how that teaching cycle or the success of that teaching cycle went. I guess I look at their achievement. So how well they achieved the art making skill, or how well they completed their written task. I use that and I reflect on my teaching in a way that will inform my future teaching practice. So their next unit of work, they might need a lot more work with learning how to write about art, for example, how to write an art analysis or interpretation. They might need more specific teaching of that, more explicit teaching of that. So it's not necessarily looking or collecting data. It's just kind of, I just do it. It's just there. It just happens naturally. And I think that's one of the important parts of being a teacher that cares. So I look at what they were able to achieve. I reflect on how well I taught them those skills, and I move forward from there.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so sort of the final couple of questions now. It's just primarily around sort of moving into the profession. So what are your memories of your first few years of teaching? Are there any sort of things that I should expect going in?
It's hard. The first year is definitely extremely difficult, and it depends on where you get a job. Most schools offer a mentoring program, which is, I would never have gotten through without a mentor, I don't think. It's incredibly difficult not having a mentor. Trying to figure it out yourself, you might know how to teach and what you got to do, but the school's processes and policies and procedures, they're all very different, and they might not tell you what they want you to do. So I think it's hard navigating the individual school policies and procedures. It's definitely long hours. Trying to figure out what you're doing, especially if you're teaching out of area, which we all do, especially in our first few years. So the first year was difficult. The second year was a lot easier, and it gets easier and easier as I have gone on. There's a lot of support in place if you know where to look or who to ask. You definitely have to ask, because it's not a bad thing. It's not a negative reflection on you asking for support or seeking support. I think it just shows that you care and that you want to improve and you want to be the best teacher you possibly can. And obviously professional development is incredibly important.
Yeah, so on that, are there any sort of opportunities that you would recommend undertaking as a beginning teacher that sort of maybe helped you, or maybe things that you wish you had done in the first 2 or 3 years?
I did a lot in the I had a really difficult class in my first year of teaching. There are no words to describe this class. So I had people in my room almost weekly, observing and working with me as the pedagogical coach was working with me, observing the lessons. I had profiling done, lots of things to help me manage their behaviour in the best way possible with very little experience in managing behaviour. Professional development, I did that weekly. Every Tuesday afternoon, I would participate in some kind of professional learning that the school held for us. So I think, having the top professional development areas for me were understand like cultural intelligence and how to respectfully embed Indigenous perspectives or even support Indigenous students in the classroom. Yeah. Obviously, behaviour management is super important. And learning how to create engaging activities and embed them into your lessons, they're really important as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, yeah, that gives me a lot to work with. It does sound a little bit daunting, but I'm sure we'll get through. So yeah, I really appreciate your time today.
No problem.
Sort of taking time out of your schedule to help me out. And yeah, hopefully I see you down the line in a school somewhere.
Yeah,
so,
and
thank you
is
very
there
much.
anything else you wanted to ask?
No, that should give me enough. That should
no worries.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. Good luck with the rest of your studies.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.